The desert wanted to kill everything. Yuna knew this better than most people. She had spent 8 years walking across the hottest and driest places on Earth, studying rocks and sand and the secrets hidden beneath them. But today, the Gobi Desert felt different. Today, it felt angry. She wiped the sweat from her forehead and looked at the small device in her hand. The thermal scanner was showing something strange. About 50 meters ahead, buried deep under the sand, there was a heat source. It was not natural. Rocks did not produce heat like this. Neither did underground water or mineral deposits. This was something else entirely. Yuna was a careful woman. She had survived this long and dangerous places because she never took foolish risks. But she was also curious. Curiosity had driven her to become a geologist. Curiosity had pushed her to explore places where no one else wanted to go. And now, curiosity was pulling her toward that strange heat signature like a magnet. She walked slowly across the burning sand. Each step made her boots sink slightly. The sun was directly overhead, and there was no shade anywhere. Her water bottle was half empty. The smart thing would be to return to her jeep, drive back to town, and report the anomaly to her team. But something kept her moving forward. When she reached the spot, she pulled out her portable shovel and began to dig. The sand was hot enough to burn through her gloves. She ignored the pain and kept digging. 1 meter down, then 2 meters. Her arms screamed with exhaustion, but she did not stop. Her shovel hit something solid. Not rock, something softer. Something that felt like leather. Then she heard the sound. It was weak and high-pitched, like a kitten crying for its mother. But it was not a kitten. Yuna had heard many animal sounds in her life, and this was not like any of them. This sound was alien, foreign, wrong in a way that made her skin crawl. She dug faster. What she uncovered made her fall backward in shock. 3 creatures lay in a shallow pit, their bodies tangled together. They were the size of house cats, but they looked nothing like any cat she had ever seen. Their skin was covered in scales that shifted color as she watched, changing from deep purple to bright silver and back again. They had wings, but the wings were crumpled and bent, pressed flat against their bodies. Their faces were long and narrow, with large amber eyes that were crusted shut, with sand and dried tears. Dragons. They looked like baby dragons. The smallest one was not moving at all. The other 2 were barely alive, their chests rising and falling in shallow, desperate breaths. Their mouths were open, and the crying sound came from them, weak and broken. Someone had buried them alive. Someone had dug this hole, placed these babies inside, and covered them with sand to die. Yuna did not think. She did not question. She simply acted. She pulled off her jacket and carefully wrapped it around the 3 creatures. Their scales were hot to the touch, almost burning, but she could feel how dry and cracked they were. Dehydration. Severe dehydration. These babies had been buried for at least a day, maybe more, baking under the desert sun without water. She opened her water bottle and tried to pour some into their mouths. The 2 larger ones made weak swallowing motions, but most of the water ran down their necks and was lost. The smallest one did not respond at all. Yuna picked up all 3 creatures and started running. Her jeep was parked almost 2 kilometers away. The sand pulled at her feet with every step. The sun beat down on her head without mercy. Her water was almost gone now, and she was giving it all to the babies in her arms. She talked to them as she ran. She did not know why. They could not understand her. They were not even from Earth. She was certain of that now. Nothing on Earth looked like these creatures. Nothing on Earth had scales that changed color or wings made of what looked like thin membrane and bone. "Stay with me," she gasped. "Just stay with me. We are almost there." The 2 larger dragons made soft chirping sounds in response. Their eyes were still closed, but they pressed their bodies against her chest. seeking her warmth, her heartbeat, her life. The smallest one remained still. Yuna reached her jeep and threw open the back door. She placed the dragons on the seat as gently as she could, then jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine. The nearest town was 4 hours away. She had maybe 2 hours of water left for the babies. She drove faster than she had ever driven in her life. The desert road was rough and unpaved. The jeep bounced and shook. Yuna kept one hand on the wheel, and one hand reached back to touch the dragons, to let them know she was still there. Halfway through the drive, she noticed that the smallest dragon had stopped breathing. Yuna pulled the jeep to the side of the road. She climbed into the back seat and picked up the tiny creature. It was so small, so fragile. Its scales had lost their color and turned a dull gray. Its eyes were still crusted shut. It had never even seen her face. She pressed her ear to its chest. Nothing. No heartbeat. No breath. Nothing. Yuna felt tears running down her face. She had failed. She had found them too late. This little one had died alone, buried in sand, abandoned by whoever had put it there. But she could not give up. Not yet. Not without trying everything. She placed the tiny dragon on her lap and began pressing gently on its chest, the way she had been taught in first aid training years ago. She breathed into its small mouth, forcing air into its lungs. She pressed again. Breathed again. Pressed again. The other two dragons watched her with their amber eyes, which had finally opened. They made soft, sad sounds, as if they understood what was happening. Yuna kept trying. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. Please, she whispered. Please do not die. Please. The tiny dragon did not respond. Yuna wrapped all 3 creatures in her jacket again and continued driving. She drove with tears blurring her vision and hope dying in her heart. The smallest dragon lay cold and still against her chest, but she refused to leave it behind. Even in death, it deserved better than being abandoned in the desert. 3 hours later, she saw the lights of the town ahead. She aimed her jeep at the brightest building she could find. A small veterinary clinic with a faded sign above the door. She burst through the entrance carrying 3 impossible creatures, one of them dead, and screamed for help. Taiho had been a veterinarian for 15 years. He had treated dogs, cats, horses, camels, and once a very angry eagle that had bitten him 3 times before he could fix its broken wing. He had seen strange things in this small border town, things that most city doctors would never believe. But nothing had prepared him for the woman who crashed through his door at sunset, covered in sand and tears, holding creatures that should not exist. I do not know what they are, Yuna gasped. But they are babies. They are dying. One of them is already dead. Taiho did not waste time with questions. He cleared his examination table and helped Yuna place the creatures down. His hands trembled slightly as he touched them for the first time. Their scales were unlike anything he had ever felt, smooth and warm and somehow alive, like they were made of living metal instead of skin. He examined the 2 larger ones first. They were weak but breathing. Their eyes, large and amber-colored, watched him with an intelligence that made his heart race. These were not simple animals. Something behind those eyes was thinking, understanding, hoping. Then he turned to the smallest one. Yuna had called it dead, but Taiho had learned long ago that death was not always immediate. Sometimes, life held on by the thinnest thread, waiting for someone to pull it back. He pressed his stethoscope to the tiny creature's chest. Nothing. He checked for any sign of brain activity, any twitch of muscle, any flutter of breath. Nothing. The little dragon was cold and gray, and still, but Taiho refused to accept it. He grabbed a syringe and filled it with a solution of electrolytes and nutrients, the same mixture he used for severely dehydrated animals. He injected it into the tiny dragon's body, guessing at the proper location based on its anatomy. Then he placed the creature under a warming lamp and began chest compressions, adapting the technique for its small size. Yuna stood beside him, her hands clenched into fists. "It has been too long," she said quietly. "I tried in the jeep. For 5 minutes. Nothing happened. Then we try for longer," Taiho said. He worked on the tiny dragon for 10 minutes. Then 20. His arms grew tired, but he did not stop. He tried different techniques, different approaches. He breathed into its lungs. He massaged its chest. He even tried gentle electric stimulation, something he had only read about in research papers. Nothing worked. Finally, Taiho stopped. He looked at the tiny creature and felt something break inside his heart. This baby had never had a chance. Someone had buried it alive, left it to die in the dark and the heat, and by the time Yuna found it, the damage was already done. He picked up the small dragon and held it against his chest. He did not know why. It was dead. Holding it would not change anything. But it seemed wrong to let it lie alone on that cold metal table. "I am sorry," he whispered to the tiny creature. "I am so sorry." The warmth of his body seeped into the cold scales. His heartbeat pressed against the dragon's still chest. His breath moved the fine membranes of its crumpled wings, and then, like a miracle, Taiho felt something. A flutter. The smallest movement, barely there, like a butterfly touching his skin. He placed the dragon on the table and pressed his stethoscope to its chest again. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, faint and irregular but unmistakably real, he heard a heartbeat. "It is alive," he breathed. "Yuna, it is alive." Yuna ran to his side. Together, they watched as the tiny dragon's chest began to rise and fall again. Its scales slowly regained their color, shifting from gray to pale purple. Its small claws twitched. A weak, high-pitched sound came from its throat. The other 2 dragons responded immediately. They made loud chirping noises and tried to crawl toward their sibling, their amber eyes bright with what could only be described as joy. Taiho worked through the night. He discovered that the dragons could not drink water normally. They had special patches on their bellies that absorbed liquid directly through the skin. He soaked soft claws in water and mineral solution and pressed them against these patches every hour. He fed the creatures a mixture of goat milk and supplements, slowly dripping it into their mouths with a tiny syringe. Yuna helped him with everything. She did not sleep. She did not complain. She simply worked beside him, caring for creatures she had found only hours ago in a burning desert. By morning, all 3 dragons were stable. Their scales had regained their beautiful purple and silver colors. Their eyes were clear and bright. They made soft musical sounds that seemed to communicate something, though neither human could understand the meaning. Yuna had given them names during the long night. The smallest one, the one who had died and come back, she called Biul, which meant star. The largest one, a male with darker purple scales, she called Hanyul, which meant sky. The middle one, a female with the brightest silver markings, she called Barm, which meant wind. The 3 dragons seemed to understand their names. When Yuna called to Biul, the tiny creature would turn its head toward her. When Taiho said Hanyul's name, the big male would chirp in response. On the 2nd day, something remarkable happened. Biul crawled out of her warming box and climbed onto Taiho's lap. She pressed her small body against his stomach and made a sound he had never heard before. A low, vibrating hum that seemed to resonate through his entire body. Taiho sat perfectly still, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever was happening. "She is bonding with you," Yuna said softly, "like a baby bird imprinting on its mother." "I am not her mother," Taiho said. "You brought her back from the dead. You held her against your heart when everyone else had given up. To her, you are everything." Taiho looked down at the tiny dragon. Buell looked back at him with those large amber eyes, and in that moment, he understood that his life had changed forever. He had saved her life, yes, but somehow, in some way he could not explain, she had saved his too. The 3 humans and 3 dragons settled into a routine over the following days. Feeding every 2 hours. Cleaning and moisturizing scales. Gentle exercises to strengthen wings that might never fly properly. Soft words and gentle touches to build trust and love. On the 4th day, Yuna looked out the clinic window at the clear desert sky. Everything seemed peaceful. Everything seemed safe. She did not know that far above the clouds, a ship was descending through the atmosphere. She did not know that the creatures she had saved were being tracked by beings who wanted them dead. She did not know that the greatest danger was not behind them, but ahead. The hunters were coming. The Valith had ruled the stars for 6,000 years. Their empire stretched across 47 solar systems, containing billions of their kind and countless slave species who served them. They were powerful, ancient, and absolutely certain that they were the greatest beings in the universe. Their power came from one simple belief: weakness must be destroyed. Any child born with defects was eliminated immediately. Any citizen who showed signs of disease or disability was removed from society. The Volith believed that mercy was poison, that compassion was a disease, and that only the strong deserved to live. Commander Kira had served the Valith enforcement fleet for 200 years. Her job was simple: travel to distant worlds and dispose of defective hatchlings where no one would ever find them. She had buried hundreds of dragon babies on dead planets, moons, and asteroids across the galaxy. It was not a job she enjoyed, but it was necessary. The law demanded it. 3 weeks ago, she had buried 3 defective hatchlings on a small blue planet in a distant arm of the galaxy. The planet was called Earth by its primitive inhabitants. Kira had chosen a large desert in the northern continent, far from any settlement. The survey data said humans were simple creatures who lived in small groups and had no advanced technology. They would never find the bodies. But now, the tracking implants in those hatchlings were still transmitting life signs. At first, Kira assumed it was a malfunction. The implants were old technology, prone to errors. She ignored the signals and continued with her other duties. But the signals persisted. Day after day, the implants reported 3 living hatchlings on Earth. Impossible. The hatchlings had been buried 2 meters deep in burning sand. They should have died within hours. No creature could survive that. After 2 weeks, the High Council ordered Kira to investigate. If the defectives were somehow still alive, they had to be destroyed. The Valith could not allow flawed genetics to survive, even on a primitive backwater planet. Kira took her fastest ship and a squad of 7 soldiers. The journey to Earth took 5 days. When they arrived, she guided her vessel down through the atmosphere under cover of darkness, using stealth technology that made the ship invisible to human sensors. The tracking implants led her to a small town at the edge of the desert. A cluster of simple buildings. Primitive vehicles. Humans sleeping in their beds, unaware of the alien ship hovering above their homes. Kira studied the scanner readings with growing confusion. The 3 hatchlings were in a building near the center of town. But they were not alone. There were heat signatures nearby, human heat signatures, and the hatchlings appeared to be healthy. More than healthy. They were thriving. This is not possible, Kira muttered to herself. She ordered her soldiers to prepare for ground operations. They would enter the town, eliminate the hatchlings, and leave before the humans even knew what happened. Simple, clean, efficient. But as her ship descended toward a landing site outside the town, something unexpected happened. Inside the veterinary clinic, Taiho was sleeping on a small cot beside the dragons. Buell was curled up on his chest, as she always was now. Hanuel and Baram were sleeping in a large box, lined with warm blankets, their wings wrapped around each other. A sound woke Taiho, a low humming noise that made his teeth vibrate. He opened his eyes and saw blue light passing across the window, moving slowly from left to right. Buell was awake too. Her amber eyes were wide with fear, and she was making a sound Taiho had never heard before, a desperate, terrified whine that made his heart pound. He picked her up and went to the window. What he saw made his blood turn cold. A ship was landing in the field behind the town. Not a human aircraft. Something else. Something alien. It was shaped like a teardrop, black and gleaming, with no visible windows or doors. Blue lights pulsed along its surface. Hanuel and Baram woke up and began making the same frightened sounds as Buell. They knew. Somehow, they knew exactly what that ship meant. Taiho grabbed his phone and called Yuna. She answered on the second ring, her voice confused and sleepy. "Come to the clinic now," Taiho said. "Something is very wrong." By the time Yuna arrived, 7 figures were walking down the main street of the town. They were tall, over 2 meters high, with bodies covered in dark scales. They wore gleaming armor and carried weapons that glowed with blue energy. Their faces were long and narrow, like the dragons, but twisted with cruelty and cold intelligence. These were the creatures who had buried the babies. Alive, Taiho gathered all 3 dragons in his arms. "We need to hide them," he said. "Where?" Yuna demanded. "Those things have technology we cannot imagine. They probably tracked the babies here somehow." She was right. Taiho knew she was right. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. These beings had crossed the stars to find these 3 small creatures and kill them. But running and hiding were not the only options. Taiho looked down at Buell. She was trembling against his chest, her small claws digging into his shirt. She was terrified. She was helpless, and she trusted him completely to protect her. "Then we do not run," Taiho said quietly. "We fight." Yuna stared at him. "Fight? Against those things? With what?" "With whatever we have. With whoever will stand with us." He handed Baram and Hanuel to Yuna and walked to the door of his clinic. Outside, the alien soldiers were going from building to building, scanning with strange devices, searching for their prey. Taiho took a deep breath and stepped outside. He walked to the house next door and knocked on the window. An old face appeared behind the glass. It was Jonho, the mayor of the town, a man of 70 years who had survived wars and disasters and everything else life had thrown at him. "Something is happening," Taiho said simply. "I need your help." Jonho looked past him at the alien soldiers walking down the street. His old eyes widened, but his face showed no fear. He had seen too much in his life to be frightened by anything now. "What do you need?" he asked. "Everyone. I need everyone." Within 30 minutes, the entire town was awake. 43 people gathered in the street, armed with hunting rifles, kitchen knives, farming tools, and pure human stubbornness. They formed a line in front of the veterinary clinic, blocking the path to the 3 baby dragons inside. The alien soldiers stopped. They had expected no resistance. They had expected simple, primitive creatures who would cower and flee. Instead, they found humans who were ready to die for creatures they had only known for a few days. Commander Kira stepped forward and looked at the crowd of humans with cold amusement. "You do not understand what you are doing," she said in broken Korean. "Step aside. We want only the defectives." "They are not defectives," Yuna called out from inside the clinic. She stepped through the door, holding Baram in her arms. "They are children. They are genetic failures, weak, useless. They must be destroyed. Then your law is wrong." Kira raised her weapon. Blue energy hummed along its barrel. One shot could kill every human in this street, but she did not fire. Not yet. Something about this situation confused her, disturbed her in ways she could not explain. Why were these humans willing to die for creatures that were not even their own species? The standoff lasted for hours. Commander Kira and her soldiers stood on one side, weapons raised, blue energy humming. The humans stood on the other side, a ragged line of farmers and shopkeepers and children, holding weapons that seemed like toys compared to Velith technology. Neither side moved. Neither side attacked. Kira was confused. In 200 years of service, she had never encountered anything like this. The Velith way was simple. Show strength, inspire fear, eliminate opposition. Every species she had ever met had followed this pattern. They saw Velith power and they submitted. But these humans did not submit. They stood their ground with shaking hands and frightened eyes, and they refused to move. "You are being foolish," Kira announced. Her translator device converted her words into the human language. "We do not want to harm you. We only want the defectives. Give them to us, and we will leave your world in peace." Junho, the old mayor, stepped forward. His hunting rifle was older than some of the children standing behind him. It would be useless against Velith armor, but he held it like a soldier, like a man who had fought before and would fight again. "Why do you want to kill them?" he asked. "They are babies. What threat could they possibly be to you?" "They are not a threat. They are a contamination. Their genetics are flawed. If they are allowed to survive, to reproduce, their weakness will spread through our species like a disease." "What weakness?" "I have watched these creatures for days. They are strong. They fight to survive. They love each other." Kira made a sound of disgust. "Their wings are malformed. They will never fly properly. Among our people, flight is everything. A Velith who cannot fly is not truly Velith. Then your definition of Velith is too small." The words came from Taiho. He walked out of the clinic carrying Buell against his chest. The tiny dragon was awake now, her amber eyes fixed on the Velith soldiers with a mixture of fear and defiance. Kira stared at the human and the dragon. Something about the way they held each other disturbed her. The dragon showed no fear of the human. The human showed no disgust for the dragon. They were connected in a way that Kira had never seen before. "You called him weak," Taiho continued, his voice calm and steady. "But Buell died in my arms 4 days ago. Her heart stopped beating. Her lungs stopped breathing. She was dead." He held up the tiny dragon so Kira could see her clearly. "I brought her back. I refused to give up on her. And now she is alive, she is healthy, and she trusts me with her life. That is not weakness. That is survival. That is strength." Buell made a soft chirping sound and pressed her head against Taiho's cheek. "This changes nothing," Kira said, but her voice was less certain now. "The law is clear. Defectives must be eliminated. Then change the law. The law cannot be changed. It has existed for 6,000 years. 6,000 years of killing your own children." Taiho shook his head. 6,000 years of throwing away lives that could have been saved. "How many babies have you buried, Commander? How many of them could have survived if someone had just given them a chance?" Kira did not answer. She could not answer. The truth was too large and too painful to speak aloud. She had buried hundreds, thousands. She had lost count long ago. And she had always told herself it was necessary. It was right. It was the only way. But now, looking at this tiny dragon alive and healthy in a human's arms, she began to wonder if everything she believed was wrong. One of her soldiers stepped forward. "Commander, we are wasting time. Give the order. We can eliminate these humans and take the defectives in seconds." It was true. Valeth weapons could level this entire town before the humans could even fire a single shot. This standoff was absurd. The outcome was never in doubt. And yet, Yuna walked out of the clinic holding Hanuel and Barum. She stood beside Taiho, the three dragons now together, surrounded by the humans who had sworn to protect them. "You want to know why we are doing this," Yuna said to Kira. "You want to understand why we are willing to die for creatures we just met. Creatures who are not even from our world." "Yes," Kira admitted. "I do not understand. Because that is what humans do. We take care of the weak. We protect the vulnerable. We love things that cannot love us back. Things that are strange and different and sometimes dangerous. It is not logical. It does not make sense by your standards. But it is who we are. It is foolish. It will get you killed. Maybe. But we would rather die protecting something innocent than live by abandoning it." Kira was silent for a long moment. Her soldiers watched her, waiting for orders. The humans watched her, waiting for death. The dragons watched her, waiting for judgment. Then Buell did something unexpected. She opened her mouth and began to sing. It was not a sound that Kira had ever heard before. It was high and pure and beautiful, a melody that seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to her heart. Hanuel and Barum joined in, their voices harmonizing with Buell's, creating a song that filled the street and rose toward the stars. Kira's soldiers froze. Their weapons lowered slightly. Their eyes widened with shock. "That is impossible," one of them whispered. "That is the bonding song. No Valeth has sung that in centuries." The bonding song was ancient. It was said that in the early days of the Valeth species, before the laws of purity were established, dragons would sing this song to form lifelong connections with their loved ones. But the song required a certain genetic trait, a trait that the purity laws had classified as a defect. Every dragon capable of singing the Tiyuf bonding song had been eliminated. Until now. Kira listened to the three baby dragons singing, and she felt something she had not felt in 200 years. She felt tears forming in her eyes. "Commander," her soldier said urgently, "what are your orders?" Kira looked at the humans, at the dragons, at this strange little town on a primitive planet at the edge of the galaxy. She thought about 6,000 years of law and tradition. She thought about the hundreds of babies she had buried with her own hands. And she thought about the song, that beautiful, impossible song that she had been taught was extinct. "We are leaving," she said quietly. Her soldiers stared at her in disbelief. "Commander? You heard me. We are returning to the ship. We are leaving this world. But the defectives, they are not defectives." Kira turned and began walking back toward the landing site. "They are something we tried to destroy. And we failed." Her soldiers hesitated, then followed her. The humans watched them go, still holding their useless weapons, still standing in their line of defiance. Before she reached her ship, Kira turned back one final time. She looked at Taiho, who was still holding Buell against his chest. "You have made powerful enemies today," she said. "The Dominion does not forgive defiance." "Then we will deal with that when it comes," Taiho replied. "You do not understand what you have started." "Maybe not, but I know what I saved. And that is enough for me." Kira boarded her ship without another word. The engines hummed to life, and the vessel rose into the sky, disappearing among the stars. The humans stood in silence, watching the ship leave, not quite believing what had just happened. They had won. Somehow, impossibly, they had won. But Taiho knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The news spread across Earth like fire. Within hours of the Valeth ship departing, videos and photos of the alien soldiers appeared on every news channel and social media platform. People around the world watched in amazement and terror as the footage showed 7 armored, aliens walking through a small Mongolian town. Confronted by ordinary humans with hunting rifles and farming tools, the world changed. Overnight, governments demanded answers. Scientists demanded access to the dragons. Religious leaders declared the event a sign from heaven or hell, depending on their beliefs. Ordinary people simply stared at their screens and tried to understand that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Through it all, Taiho and Yuna stayed in the small veterinary clinic with their 3 dragons. They refused all interviews. They rejected all offers of money and fame. They simply continued caring for Beul, Haniel, and Baram, feeding them every few hours, helping them exercise their crumpled wings, loving them as if they were their own children. The dragons grew quickly. Within a month, Beul had doubled in size. Her scales had become deeper purple, almost black in certain light, with streaks of silver that seemed to glow when she was happy. Her wings remained small and bent, unable to lift her into the air, but she learned to use them for balance and gliding. Haniel grew even larger, his body becoming powerful and muscular. He was protective of his sisters, always watching for danger, always ready to defend them. His eyes, once filled with fear, now showed confidence and strength. Baram remained the most playful of the 3. She loved to chase butterflies and pounce on shadows. Her wings were slightly better developed than her siblings, and she could glide for short distances, chirping with joy as she floated through the air. But it was Bile who showed the most remarkable changes. She had bonded completely with Taiho. She followed him everywhere, slept on his pillow at night, and refused to eat unless he was present. When he was sad, she would press her head against his hand and sing soft, comforting melodies. When he was happy, she would dance around his feet and make sounds that seemed like laughter. Scientists who were finally allowed to examine her discovered something amazing. Beul's brain showed activity patterns that were almost identical to human emotional centers. She was not just bonded to Taiho. She understood him. She felt what he felt. She loved him in a way that was deeper and more complete than any animal bond ever documented. The Volith had called her defective because her wings could not fly. But her true gift was something far more valuable. She could connect with other beings at a level that normal Valith could not achieve. 3 months after the standoff, visitors began arriving from space. They came in small ships, 1 or 2 at a time, bearing messages of curiosity and hope. They were species from other parts of the galaxy, beings who had heard about what happened on Earth. They had heard that humans had stood against the mighty Valith, Dominion to protect free, helpless alien children. They wanted to know if the stories were true. The first visitor was a small, blue-skinned being called Remy. She represented a species that had been enslaved by the Valith for over 1,000 years. Her people had heard the legend of the humans who defied the Dominion, and they had come to see for themselves. Yuna met Remy outside the clinic. The alien was barely 4 feet tall, with large dark eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sorrow. "Is it true?" Remy asked through her translator. "Did you really stand against the Valith for creatures that were not your own?" "Yes," Yuna said simply. "It is true." "Why?" "You could have given them up. You could have saved yourselves." Yuna thought about the question for a long moment. Then she called Baram to her side. The young dragon bounded over happily and leaned against Yuna's legs, making her musical chirping sounds. "Because she needed us," Yuna said. "Because when we found them, they were dying and afraid and alone. And when someone needs help, you help them. It does not matter where they come from or what they look like. You help them because it is right." Remy stared at Yuna with her large, dark eyes. Then she did something unexpected. She began to cry. "My people have been waiting for someone like you," she whispered. "We have been waiting for so long." More visitors came. And more. Each one brought stories of suffering under Valith rule. Stories of children killed for being different. Stories of entire species crushed beneath the weight of the Dominion's cruelty. And each one asked the same question. Would humans stand with them too? The answer was always yes. 6 months after the standoff, Earth received its first formal request for alliance from an alien civilization. Then another. Then another. Within a year, humanity had diplomatic relationships with 17 different species. All of them bound together by a simple truth. Humans did not abandon those who needed help. The Valith Dominion watched these developments with growing anger. Commander Kira had been stripped of her rank and imprisoned for her failure to eliminate the defectives. The High Council debated sending a fleet to destroy Earth and everyone on it, but they hesitated. The galaxy was watching now. Earth was no longer a forgotten backwater planet. It was the center of a growing alliance, a symbol of hope for every species that had ever suffered under Valith rule. If the Dominion attacked Earth, they would face not just primitive humans with hunting rifles. They would face a coalition of species who had finally found the courage to resist. On a warm summer evening, Taiho sat on the roof of his clinic, watching the sunset. Buell was curled up in his lap, her eyes half closed, her body warm against his legs. She made soft humming sounds as he stroked her scales. Completely at peace, Haniel and Barham were playing in the yard below, chasing each other in circles. Their crumpled wings spread wide as they leaped and glided and tumbled. Yuna watched them with a smile on her face. "You know," Taiho said quietly, "I used to think my life was small. I was just a veterinarian in a tiny town in the middle of nowhere. Nothing special. Nothing important." Buell opened one eye and looked up at him. "Then I found you," Taiho continued. "A tiny dead dragon in the desert. And everything changed." Buell chirped and pressed her head against his hand. "Thank you," Taiho whispered. "Thank you for changing everything." The sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. Somewhere far above, among the stars, the future waited. There would be challenges ahead. There would be danger and fear and difficult choices. But for now, in this moment, there was only peace. A man and his dragon, watching the sunset together. Grateful for every breath, every heartbeat, every impossible miracle that had brought them to this place. The Valith had buried 3 baby dragons in the desert to die instead. They had planted the seeds of their own destruction, and those seeds had been watered with human tears, nurtured with human love, and grown into something the galaxy had never seen before. Hope, the kind of hope that could change the universe. And it all started with one woman, one shovel, and a refusal to give up on 3 small lives that everyone else had thrown away. That was the human way. That was always the human way.